It was a place where dreams went to die, a cold, empty warehouse filled with broken machines, shattered glass, and the faint echo of forgotten ambition. This wasn't where success stories began, but for him, it was the only place left. Just months ago, James had a thriving business. He'd built it from scratch, pouring every ounce of his energy and passion into it. The orders were steady, the team was growing, and the dream of building something lasting seemed within reach. But success can be fragile. One unexpected downturn, one big client pulling out, and everything began to unravel. The collapse was swift and merciless. Suppliers demanded payments he couldn't make. Staff he cared for deeply had to be let go. And in the end, James stood in an empty office, holding a single box of belongings, switching off the lights for the last time. It wasn't just the business he lost. It was his sense of purpose, his belief in himself. He carried the weight of failure everywhere he went. At a family dinner not long after, he plastered on a smile, trying to act as though everything was fine. But it was impossible to hide the truth. His uncle, blunt as always, commented, "Maybe it's time to get a real job." His cousin chimed in, "You've always been a dreamer. It's okay to let it go." The words stung more than James expected. Losing the business had been devastating, but hearing doubt from those closest to him was almost unbearable. Later that night, James sat alone in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Rain streaked down the windows, mirroring the tears on his face. "What if they're right?" he whispered to himself. In that moment, it felt like the world had won. The fight in him seemed all but gone, but sometimes hope hides in the unlikeliest of places. For James, it was an old, abandoned warehouse, a space others saw as worthless, but he saw as potential. Walking through the dust-filled room, sunlight streaming through broken windows, he picked up a rusty machine part. It didn't look like much, but something about it sparked an idea. The warehouse was run down, sure, but it was still standing. And for James, that was enough. If this place can survive, so can I, he thought. With that small glimmer of hope, he threw himself into rebuilding. It wasn't easy. He pitched his new idea to anyone who would listen, investors, old clients, even friends, but every door slammed shut. "It's too risky. We're not interested." Rejection became a daily routine. Late one night, sitting on the warehouse floor with his head in his hands, James nearly gave up. The rain poured outside, leaking through the roof, and he felt as broken as the building around him. But then a thought struck him. "I've already lost everything. What more do I have to fear?" Using the last of his savings, James refurbished one old machine. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. He stayed up late every night, learning, tinkering, and improving. Slowly, something began to take shape. Days turned into weeks, and finally, the first breakthrough came. A local business agreed to test his prototype. It wasn't a big order, but it was enough to reignite his determination. Small successes followed. Orders trickled in, and the warehouse began to hum with life. James worked tirelessly, hiring a small team and teaching them everything he had learned. Together, they celebrated their first major contract, a moment James would never forget. For the first time in years, he felt like he was building something that mattered. But the journey wasn't without its final test. Just as things seemed to be turning around, a major client threatened to pull out due to delays. The team looked to James for leadership. The pressure was immense. Everything he had rebuilt was on the line. James rallied his team, working through the night to meet the deadline. Against all odds, they delivered. That moment wasn't just about keeping a client. It was about proving to himself that he could overcome anything. Now the warehouse is unrecognizable. Machines hum, workers laugh, and the air buzzes with purpose. Standing outside at sunset, James looks up at the sign above the door, now bearing the name of his company. The journey hadn't been about never falling. It had been about always getting back up. He started with nothing, faced everything, and built something extraordinary. So ask yourself, when the world pushes you down, will you stay there? Or will you rise?